let's switch this. And yeah, we should be live. So after a brief technical intermission, we are here. A little bit haphazard setup, but nonetheless. And welcome back to the Undermind Podcast, which had a quite long of hiatus in the past few months, even years. And my guest today is Dan Gant, who I will be talking about not just StarCraft AI, but gaming in general. So this is a little bit very last minute, as you might have guessed by the quite delayed announcement and such, but anyway, we are here. So let's start with the usual. Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dan Gant. If you're watching this, likely you know me best as the author of purplewave, StarCraft AI bot that has won 4 tournaments and placed top 3 in most others since 2017. I also spent some time working at Facebook AI Research on their machine learning platform for StarCraft, Torchcraft AI, and the subsequent bot that they use to enter competitions, Cherry Pie.
Awesome. So it is entirely up to you. Like I said, this is no longer just StarCraft related. So if you want to tell your life story, then feel free to go ahead. But just joining that a little bit, you're still working actively on your StarCraft AI called purplewave.
Yeah.
Would that be correct?
And yeah, absolutely. Worked on within the past week. Still looking to take top spots at competitions.
And what is how do you feel? What is the state of purplewave right now? It's I mean, how far has it come? What would you say the skill level of it is in terms of human play?
Like never been stronger. The top bots like purplewave get better every year. Competition's been getting very strong over the past few years. I haven't done a ton of games against humans lately, and I haven't really been keeping up too much with how it's been doing on Snail, where there are a few complexities in measuring how well it's doing. But I still think the top bots right now are playing somewhere around a 1750, 1800 level on Battle.net, which is to say they could beat most humans who play regularly on Battle.net.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. And I hope within the next year or two to have it at a level where I'll be able to do more show matches against humans, be able to do some show matches and maybe take some heads.
Well, I would be happy to facilitate that, and yeah, it's been a delight to see all the games. I haven't been following that closely anything StarCraft AI related. You might have noticed my absence in that area, but still, I'm the leaps and bounds that just the AIs have come during my time in this scene is amazing, and yeah, it's just great to see. And now I know the answer, but I'm gonna ask for the audiences. What else have you been working on recently?
I've been working for the past, I guess, about a month or two on making a 4-dimensional puzzle video game. If you picture Portal, a game where you have a first-person perspective and you're going through a series of rooms solving puzzles with physical geometrical aspects to them, that's what this game is about. The current working title is Go Forth. Little pun on 4 dimensions. And the first question people usually ask is, what does it mean to be a 4-dimensional game? Isn't the 4th dimension time? This is a 4th spatial dimension. So we humans experience reality in 3 spatial dimensions. We also kind of grok intuitively 2-dimensional play. For example, like classic Mario Brothers games or most board games take place in 2-dimensional spaces. But mathematically, there's no reason why you can't have a 4th spatial dimension. So the challenge of the game then becomes being able to understand a depiction of 4-dimensional space that's been projected onto your 2-dimensional screen and to solve puzzles while navigating that additional spatial complexity.
Just to circle back a little bit, I see that Macrave has asked a question in the chat about bot meta and human meta in StarCraft AI. And the question is, are we behind the meta or are we diverging? What are your thoughts on that? Sorry to disrupt your flow state on the game. We will get back to that.
No problem at all. I think StarCraft fundamentally puts some constraints on what is good and what will work against opponents who are trying everything that's within their toolbox to beat you. And I think those constraints are just not that different between bot and human play. I think there will be some differences. There are going to be units that computers can handle with their infinite multitasking ability in ways that humans can't. Their ability to stay on top of units and eke the most out of them on a frame by frame basis. But I think the amount that changes the gameplay is limited. So I expect that as bots continue to improve, they will necessarily continue to have to adopt a lot of the strategies that humans have used, but may be able to do some things that are not as effective for humans, but make it more effective than what the humans are doing. Meanwhile, there can be some things that are harder for bots to do. This has always been the case. There are some strategies and techniques that are harder for bot authors to employ than for human players to employ.
Would you like to provide some examples?
Sure. So the first example, when people watch bots play, one of the things that really jumps out at them is the way that Protoss Dragoons handle ranged units. They're very controllable. You can have them step forward, take a shot, step back while they recharge. And humans can control Dragoons well, but it's hard for them to stay on top of individual Dragoons. It's hard for them to control them full time while doing other things like reducing units and managing their economy. So bots can get more juice out of Dragoons than humans can. That said, Dragoons still have statistical limitations. They only have so many hit points. They only do so much damage. So while you can get more out of them, they're not necessarily going to be a end all be all for play, I believe. By contrast, there are some techniques that humans employ. They're much harder to code explicitly. I'll cite an example which I don't think is going to be a long-term issue, but has been an issue for all of the years that bots have been competing to date, which is army movement that isn't towards or away from the opponent. So something like positioning your army such that you can set up a flank and sandwich your opponent's army. This is, I think, it's something that's achievable for bots, but it's something that's more difficult because it's harder to state what it is that you want the army to do. It's harder to clearly specify what constitutes a good place to go for a flank, what conditions are good conditions in order to do it. When is it a good idea to go for a flank versus keeping your army together? And considerations like that tend to be a little harder for bots than they are for humans. I think in that specific case, we'll get there, but there are going to be other things where humans are just going to be better than bots for the foreseeable future doing.
I think that's an excellent answer. And do you watch StarCraft games? Obviously, you watch human versus AI or AI versus AI games, but do you follow the current tournaments and meta and everything?
Yeah, I watch all the ASL matches, stay up to date on those. Whatever discussion is happening online on strategy and the current meta on Reddit, Team Liquid, Discord, I tend to stay up to date on that.
Do you even play StarCraft or don't have that kind of time anymore?
Barely. I've probably played less than 100 games since Remastered came out.
All right, so that's StarCraft for now, and let's move back to your 4D game. Remind me of the name again, please.
The working title is Go Forth.
Go Forth. I believe it was something different before, no? Or it is my just memory. It is just my memory failing me.
If you've imagined a better title or a different title, I'm all ears. Still very much working title.
No, oh yeah, I think I'm confusing it with Getting Over It, which is an entirely different game, but in a similar, I don't know, semantic space in my head. And what are the inspirations for it Go Forth?
So there have been attempts at making video games in 4 dimensions going back many years. The oldest example that comes to mind is from 1988, and most of these games that have been made, there's actually a Wikipedia article which lists all of them, 4-dimensional games. Most of them have really been tech demos. They've been demonstrating a proof of concept. Like, yes, we can render 4-dimensional space on a screen in various ways. We can try to portray it on your 2-dimensional screen in various ways, and then trying to construct some gameplay around it. But it's usually a very basic attempt. It's not really done with a sense of trying to make a polished, finished product for someone to play. And I played my first of these. I want to say like 2008 was the first time I played a 4-dimensional game. I tried out a couple, and the one that really stuck out in my mind was a 4-dimensional maze game, and it was a lot of fun. You know, there's I have a daughter. She's 18 months old, and part of the joy of being a parent is watching a human go from not being able to control their own hands and fingers to being able to pick things up and gain mastery over things. And boy, does it take a lot of time and work to, pick up a piece of food and place it in your mouth. It's really hard.
I still haven't really mastered that part. So the next,
And
yep, go on. Sorry.
no, sorry, I'll just finish the point. And we take for granted how 3-dimensional space or really 2-dimensional space work. We rock it very intuitively. So then adding another spatial dimension, which kind of mathematically is just a logical extension of the previous ones, it seems like it should be not too hard to extrapolate, but it's hard. It's hard to reason about 4-dimensional space. But the joy I felt when I was playing these games was over time, over playing these games for a couple of hours, was starting to feel like, wait a second, I could actually get some understanding of the space. I feel this competency developing, and it was a really memorable sensation. So over the years, I've come back and looked and checked up on what other games have been made in 4D, and really, I've been kind of disappointed to not see games that were the kind of game I wanted to play being made. And so I decided now's finally the time. I want to make this game, and I think other people want to play it too.
There was a game, I unfortunately don't remember the name, where you could solve puzzles by shifting the perspective. So if you zoomed in your camera and pressed the button, then the perspective became the real dimensions of the object. So if you went close to something, you got a really big cube. It was a really great idea, but unfortunately I don't remember. Do you know this game?
I describe a fair number of games. For example, I'm thinking of Fez, which I was playing lately, which kind of has that effect.
It might have been it, yes. I don't know. I'm gonna search for it.
Yeah, there are a number of games. Monument Valley is another one where it treats the 2D projection of a 3D space as a kind of ground truth, where and I think in both Fez and Monument Valley you'll have a situation where you might have two walls, each of which has a ladder on it, which when viewed from one perspective are not adjacent, but when you rotate your camera perspective, they visually appear as a continuous object, and in game you're allowed to treat it as one.
Oh, wow.
Both Fez and Monument Valley have aspects of that, and I'm sure other games do as well.
I already struggle with 3D spatial reasoning. Funny story, this is I started playing Satisfactory and I didn't enjoy it, although I'm a really big fan of Factorio, and yeah, the one dimension is the difference exactly. I'm just not good with 3D games, and I suck at FPSs for the same reason. And to go back to your game, what is or is there a core gameplay loop, or are you just more interested in the experimentation of this medium, so to speak?
The core gameplay loop I expect will be similar to Portal. You enter a room, you have an exit that you're trying to get out of, and the space itself presents the obstacle of how do I get from point A to point B. And so to get there, you'll have to manipulate, you'll have to navigate 4-dimensional space, which will involve, for example, any 4-dimensional projection into 3D space as depicted in your 2D screen will mean you can't actually see all of the space at once. In the same way that if you picture, Mario playing Mario, if you had a 3D cube moving through your screen, if the 3D cube isn't intersecting the plane that Mario is in, you can't see the cube. He can't see the cube. You can look around potentially and then rotate the object into your limited perspective, and then you can navigate around it. But being in a 4-dimensional space depicted on a 2D screen means you can't see everything all at once, which makes some things a lot harder. So core gameplay loop, as you were originally asking, escaping rooms by navigating and manipulating 4-dimensional space.
But the game space itself is fully explorable, so you cannot see it at once, but eventually you can see everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And there is no hidden stuff. And there is a funny comment saying that fighting games are 4D. You got to think what your opponent would do. Well, yeah, I guess that's sort of a take. And what is the state of the project?
I built a little prototype in JavaScript so it's playable in the web browser and easily shareable, just to explore how people would feel about exploring a space where they have to shift this additional, they have to deal with this additional dimension where you rotate through a fourth dimension and objects pop into view and become collidable or pop out of view and become collidable. Just to spark discussion about how people felt about that, their reactions to it, find out ideas of other games that they've played which incorporate related mechanics so I can kind of expand my reading list, so to speak. And after that, really restarting from scratch technically in Unreal Engine and working on four-dimensional rendering in Unreal. There'll be a few puzzles I have to solve to properly get that, but I have a roadmap I'm pretty confident on. I hope within a few weeks to a couple months I'll have some four-dimensional rendering in Unreal Engine and be able to start building more of a finalized gameplay model from there.
Any particular reason for picking Unreal Engine?
Yeah, ultimately, I see this is to be both a passion and a commercial project. The fact that people love puzzle games, people love platformer puzzle games, the particularly well-made ones especially. There's a big market for it. Lots of people play Portal. Millions of people played Portal. Fez was a big seller. Braid was a big seller. These are games that people are really interested in playing. And the feedback I've gotten just from the prototyping has been really enthusiastic. And not just because I invited a bunch of my friends to play, but people tell me, like, really, this is a game I would really love to see happen. So Unreal Engine gives you a lot of ability to run reliably on a bunch of different hardware. So if you want to bring a game to market, it really helps to use an engine like this so you don't have to worry about a bunch of different kinds of platform compatibility. You get a lot of things built in. You also get very good rendering. You get the ability to render something that's really beautiful. And to me, part of the experience I want to bring in this game is visual spectacle, really, really full sensory spectacle with audio as well. And I wanted a powerful engine to do it. There are a few choices for that, of course, but particularly I went with, for example, Unreal over Unity because Unreal is open source. You can modify the source, and for a game that's going to have four-dimensional rendering, I thought the likelihood that I would need to do that at some point would be pretty high. And I also think the momentum has really shifted in Unreal Engine's favor in terms of what for new features, for things like documentation being good, for things like examples out there being good. I worked with Unity for a little while and found that there was a really bad problem of documentation rot. A lot of things describing how to do things in Unity were out of date, broken. Even links were broken between websites. And Unreal does not seem to have nearly as much of a problem.
That is actually an excellent point. I'm struggling with the same thing. I work, but not work. I have some projects that are in Unity for various reasons. I prefer Unity, but I'm not like an evangelist for it. And I wanted to bring up the point of compatibility because Unity is literally in the name that the intent is to run. The Irish accent is rubbing off on me. To run on everything. So yeah, but you answered my question before I even. That's some forward thinking right there. And any let's go one step back. It sounds like that you have actual plans to release this game and, like you said, treat it as a commercial project and have a roadmap. I was going to ask that as well. That so there is a definite end to the, well, not end, but a definite version that you're planning to put it out in 1.0.
Yeah, I the way I see it is getting to a point where you have the 4D rendering, you have gameplay, and you have a playable demo. Solving a few puzzles, maybe it lasts 15 minutes, and getting that out there, getting feedback on it, and depending on how things are trending, either possibly releasing that publicly and kickstarting based off that, or maybe just continuing to keep that in-house and develop and release a full product.
Are you the only person currently working on this?
Yes, currently.
And yeah, and what are the plans on expanding that, if I may ask?
I want to lock down the main technical challenge of the project, which is getting that four-dimensional rendering, before really considering any other expansion, because it's it's not a part of the project that scales very well to additional people. It's not something that you can really build much on until you have that locked down. And that's it's partly a technical challenge. It's also partly a design challenge of how do you depict four-dimensional space in a way that people are going to grok it. If you look at existing four-dimensional games, a lot of them really struggle to make that four-dimensional space grokkable. And I think a really big key to that is giving players all the affordances that you can. So some of the choices I'm working with right now, which all these can be revisited in the future, but what I think is the starting base is having believable 3D spaces. So something you look around, it looks like a room. A lot of existing 4D games take place in abstract spaces, and it's very easy to get lost when you don't have things like walls where you can kind of intuit which way is up, floors that look like floors, objects that help give you a sense of orientation. So having those, and then one of the issues with rendering 4D into 2D is you have to hide a lot of the information. So if you picture Mario, again, from the perspective of Mario looking down the length of your monitor, seeing essentially like a one-dimensional row of pixels in front of his face, and then a 3D object, like a cube, comes and intersects his space, what you see is just a cross-section of that cube in Mario's space from his perspective. So let's say the cube is on its point. You might see a little point of a cube that widens as the cube, the thickness of the cube intersects the screen, and then drops back down to a point as it leaves the other way. So that would be a cross-sectional way of depicting a cube in two-dimensional space. Another way would be a projection. So if you take a photograph of a cube and you have a printed photograph of a cube, that's a 3D object that's been projected onto a 2D space. So you really see the whole thing at once, except for the fact that the front of the cube includes the back. But that's all of it in one space. Each of these two different ways of showing a higher dimensional object in a lower dimensional space, a cross-section, like a cube going through your screen, and a projection, like a photograph of a cube, they both have big limitations. With the projection, there's a lot of information to digest at once. Parts of the cube include other parts of the cube. You can't see the whole thing at once. It takes up a lot of space, so to speak. Whereas with a cross-section, the problem is you can only perceive a tiny part of an object at once. And if you're not even looking at it, if you're looking, if the cube is not intersecting your screen, you can't see anything at all. So the solution I want to work with is a cross-sectional approach where you show the cross-section at full opacity on your screen, but parts of it which are slightly away from the cross-section. So for example, a cube that's approaching your Mario's screen but not intersecting it appear transparent. And the further away they are, the more transparent they get. And that's something I played with in the prototype that I shared with playtesters. And for example, one of the pieces of feedback I got there was it's helpful to know where those objects are, but just transparency alone doesn't tell me which way I have to rotate in 4 dimensions to get to the object. If it's partly transparent, do I rotate in the in direction or the out direction? So I need to experiment to find ways to better depict that. One idea I have for that is tinting things red or blue depending on the 4-dimensional direction, 4-dimensional displacement the object has from your camera perspective. But that's the kind of thing that I need to test and really get locked down before broader development can really begin the project, before you can really design and play through levels and get playtesters involved. So to your original question about scaling up the project, that's the kind of stuff I want to lock down before I consider scaling up the project.
Can you talk about a little bit? I'm very curious. How do you even represent this in a code / architecture, or what is the how do you store a 4D level? Let's phrase it that way. However inaccurate that might be.
Sure. The boring simple answer is anything you can store in 3D, you can store in 3D, you can store in 4D, right? If you have a list of 3-dimensional points, you can have a list of 4-dimensional points. However, if you're working with an existing engine like Unreal, it's really only designed for 3 dimensions. So the way I expect to do it technically is have objects that have a 4-dimensional representation, boil them down to a 3D mesh, and then render the 3D mesh. That also is going to need to require some other transmission properties like things that are going to need to go to shading. So you'll have to know your 4-dimensional distance from the camera in order to do something like add opacity to add the tinting. But really just have a separate layer outside the engine where the 4-dimensional objects are represented, and then in real time, get the 3-dimensional cross section that you need, and render that.
It's a little bit hard to digest, but I think I follow. So
yeah. Ultimately, you're dealing with a 3D engine. You have 3D objects, and you're going to render 3D objects. So you have your game logic and your own data, which lives outside the game engine, and in game, boil that 4-dimensional object down to your 3-dimensional representation, and then render that like it's an ordinary 3D object.
And have you done anything like that before? Because this apparently you said there are existing 4D games, so you're not the one, not the first one to think about this. I certainly haven't really encountered anything similar. But have you worked in this area, or where does the inspiration come from?
I've made games a lot before. I spent a lot of middle school and high school making video games. I spent some time after I graduated college doing some modding. But it's been a very long time since I've done it. So this is me returning to something that I used to do a lot of and really loved. So now I'm catching up on modern technology. This is my first time using a real engine. This is actually my first time really doing non-faked 3D.
I specifically was referring to like 4D games, but still, the answer is interesting.
I'll definitely have to be refreshing my linear algebra to get some of this done. But ultimately, the math that's required you have to reinvent the wheel. What needs to be done already exists out there. It's extrapolations of 3D math to 4D. So I'll figure it out as I go.
I feel that is a common trope in video game development, and I actually found it in certain ways easier because, as you said, most problems are solved, and not just solved, but there is a library that you can just copy paste in Spirit. Sometimes verbatim, but we are not that lucky. And speaking of previous projects, you have had quite a few. Would you like to talk about your previous video game and or mod attempts? And well, let's leave it as an open-ended question.
Sure. I got started making games when I was like 8 or so, and I had a magazine called 321 Contact. It's by the same parent company that makes Sesame Street, and in every one of these issues, they would have a little game in BASIC, and I asked my dad, "How do I put these into the computer?" And he showed me the BASIC interpreter and tossed me a 300-page manual, which I could never actually make sense of. And I took these games to the magazine, punched them in, and got them running. And I could make little tweaks to them with the limited knowledge I had to get different results. And then in 1995, I got a copy of Click and Play, which is this visual game editor. Really drag and drop WYSIWYG interface, create rules via WYSIWYG, and you can actually make a fair amount of games with that. And that's why I spent years working with. And this is really before I became more into what one might call proper coding, but using major programming languages. So I made these click and play games for a bunch of years, and around late high school I was still making them, but that was also when I started picking up other languages. I learned Python, and then in college I worked a little bit in C++ games. I did an internship at a Game Lab, a video game developer out here in New York. And after college, I worked on a Warcraft 3 mod called Bandits. I worked on it for a few months with the pipe dream at the time of getting a job at Blizzard, which went absolutely nowhere. But had a lot of fun making that mod, getting people to play test and making design changes based on feedback. And it was a great experience. It was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing that again.
Well, it shows that be careful what you wish for. I'm pretty sure you could get a job at Blizzard nowadays.
Very different time. Very different time for everyone involved.
Different times indeed. And did you? It's actually a little bit unrelated. Well, not really unrelated question, but I was always curious that are you a tinkerer by nature? Do you do the same thing in real world and hardware and physical objects that you do with software? Do you dissect devices? Do you try to learn crafts and that sort of stuff?
Growing up in New York poses a very particular constraint on one's interest, which is there's no space here. Wherever you live, there's no space. You don't have space to keep things. You don't have space to open up a desk and work with things. So really, my interests have really been very, very software focused, and space constraints is, I think, one of the very big reasons why that is. In some alternate universe where I grew up in a place with garages and lots of working space, that might have changed, but really my interests are very software focused.
Well, I can relate to that from the opposite side. I grew up in a house that had a locksmith workshop, and I found it weird when people just didn't have a workshop in their homes. I don't know what's wrong with them. Well, I didn't, and I was okay. So, any what did I want to say? So, previous projects. Any notable successes and failures that you like to talk about?
Uh, the first game I ever released was called, I think, Maze Maniac, and I'm pretty sure I sold at least 4 floppy disks of that to my classmates in 5th grade.
Oh, wow, that's a pretty good commercial success based on the time.
I probably even got back the cost of the floppy disks.
Uh, that's already more than most people do. But I meant successes and failures in a more of a takeaways, like hey, I learned how to do this in the scope of X. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the Bandits mod I made for Warcraft 3 back after college, uh, I took away a big lesson from that, which is that people who are looking to play uh, Warcraft 3 or Warcraft 3 mods are generally looking for a certain kind of experience. They're looking usually for a casual experience if they're playing a mod, right? They're not try-harding, they're not laddering, they're not playing something that has a bit more of a competitive scene like Dota. They want a relaxed experience. So if you try to design a mod which just encourages people to try hard and really buckle down and focus on how to beat other people versus a chance to just kind of mess around and have fun, you're not serving the audience. You're not giving them what they want. Uh, One big lesson from Dota in particular, as a very successful Warcraft 3 mod, Dota succeeds as a game largely because, one, it fulfills the original fantasy that Warcraft 3 wanted to provide, which is a strategy game revolving around heroes, by stripping away all the chaff of all the extra units and buildings and really letting you focus on the hero part, the fun part that the game was built around, even if they didn't realize it at the time. But two, team games like Dota or Counter Strike, or the very common 5v5 or 6v6 format that multiplayer games take, leans on fundamental attribution error to provide happiness to its players. Fundamental attribution error being the human tendency to say, when things went right, it's because of me. I did that. I caused that to happen. But when things would go wrong, it was outside forces at work. It was my stupid teammates. It was, bad luck, whatever it was. Having teammates is a psychological shield against failure. And that's one of the big appeals of team games, why we see team games tend to have more grip on us and have more interest than 1v1 games. And that's something I didn't fully appreciate at the time that I was making Bandits.
It's really interesting coming from you, since I know that you are much more into PvP games than PvP games.
I'm probably an oddball on that front, yeah.
It's you said that it's you phrased it like something like, if it's not competitive, I'm not interested. Are
It's
you
pretty accurate.
are you like a competitive person in other areas of your life as well? Like, can you enjoy a game without wanting to win?
I pick and choose my battles. I think it's very important to go into any gameplay experience, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and your experience. But going into a gameplay experience with a sense of what you want to get out of it. But if I'm going into a game where there's a winner and it could be you, I want to win, and I could be a very competitive jerk about that.
I think there is a stark difference between just wanting to win, because, as you said, that's the point of the game. That's why you go and play a round of football, and playing like the ends justify the means, and not caring if you make the others miserable during that. And yeah, most people don't seem to intuitively grasp that the difference between that. I think it's okay to be competitive. It's not okay to ruin others' fun just so you win imaginary points.
I think if a game is not fun to lose, it's not a very good game.
could say that, yeah. I don't know. It's let's unpack that a little bit, because what's fun about losing in League of Legends?
You come out of it with lessons. To me, one other people have talked about this too. That one of the joys of playing a game, especially a competitive game, is developing a sense of mastery. Of saying, here's this thing that I wasn't very good at originally. I didn't know left from right, and now I understand it. Now I get it. Now I know how to do this thing. And when you lose at League of Legends, ideally, if it was a good game of League of Legends, you understand why. You understand the role that you played in it. You may be also able to blame your teammates. It was that guy who was the real reason that we lost. But maybe also I could have done this better, that better, and I'm really hyped up the next time I play to do that thing better. And then also, as you play the game of League of Legends, hopefully through most of the game, you think you have a shot. You think you can win this game, and then the loss starts happening slowly, and then all at once drops off, and you either lose or your team concludes that you should surrender, and then you do so. I think
Basically,
a good gaming experience, losing is something that happens only right at the end. That the game is competitive for as long as possible. Even if you're like a little behind, you still have hope, and you're still trying, and you're still engaged. And then the collapse happens quickly, and there's a clean end to it.
basically, League of Legends has a very long denial phase.
I wouldn't say denial. I mean, there are comebacks in League of Legends, and really, as they iterate on that game and make balance patches to that aspect gets better. I think it used to be the case that it was more snowballing than it is now, or there have been times when losing was really dragged out, and you didn't have that clean coup de grace at the end. It really took time for the conclusion to be reached. In its current state, the last I played it, I haven't played too much lately, but I've played it a few times in the past couple of years. It does feel more like either the game is close and at some point, a team makes a final push to victory, or things are just going terribly from the beginning and you realize by 15 minutes this is over and the team surrenders.
Well, I really like what you said about if we win, that's because of me. If we lose, that's because of my teammates. But that, not so surprisingly, and this is not a secret at all, breeds a very toxic atmosphere, especially in people who might be in denial in regards of their own skills, and consistently think that they can never do it. And League of Legends is a notoriously toxic game. I think I had a few years of playing League of Legends competitively, and it's no coincidence that after that, for like 5 years, I only played single player game. I couldn't fathom multiplayer. Generally speaking, I tend to favor that, but yeah, that's a longer story. Speaking of, what are the gaming experiences in your life that shaped your approach to games, or said that, hey, I want to do this, but because I think that's a common theme with people who want to make games. They play a good game and, oh, I want to make this game but better or different, or this game inspired me to create a subgenre or something similar. And yeah, what are your top 5 or top 10 games that you ever played and maybe replay to this day?
I think for me, the most formative game I ever played in my life was chess. I played a lot of chess in elementary school. We had a chess club. I would play during lunch, and then I would start going to tournaments around 6th grade. I did that through 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And to me, that was really formative because it showed, one, that you could sit down and really think hard about something and make progress on it, which is, it's kind of obvious when you say it out loud, but a lot of times in life, you don't have such obvious examples of that you can sit down and concentrate on something, just thinking about it, and concretely come up with something that's better than if you just reacted and did something, that was your first idea. And, especially as a kid, kids run around, they don't tend to stay in one place very long. That kind of concentration to solve a problem, I thought was very formative. I think the fact that I do programming now is an outgrowth of the type of concentration that I learned by doing chess. But it also is a great environment to test ideas like, how do I get better at something? There is something that you can be measurably good or bad at. Chess, you have a rating, you have individual games you win or lose. You can very clearly measure your progress in chess. how do I make that number go up? How do I win more games? And it's a very deliberate self-improvement process that I think there aren't as many opportunities for, especially early in life. But games really provide a channel to learn that process of measurable self-improvement. And then doing things like, okay, I lost this game. In chess, you're encouraged to go back and look at your games, analyze them, see what went wrong, see what you could have done better. And that loop is something that applies to a lot of different fields. So for me, chess was very formative on that front. It was a little later, like 8th through 11th grade, that I picked up StarCraft, and the same ideas apply. You lose a game, you go back, you watch the replay, you see what you could have done better. You go and look what the pros do, what's working for them, how can I incorporate those into my game. Same kind of process, same kind of loop, except without the figured outness that chess has, where chess is very well figured out, and at the amateur level, there's really nothing new that you're going to invent under the sun. Whereas StarCraft has a bit of a creative element to it, where you actually can, from the perspective of the level of play that you're at, invent things that people haven't seen before.
By the way, have you ever written chess software? Maybe a bot you can play against or something like that?
Not much. My high school project, my last programming project in high school was a Python implementation of chess. No AI, just the rules of chess enforced. I never really felt motivated to make a chess AI, just because the existing ones are so good at what they do that I didn't really feel like there was a blue ocean there to explore in terms of making something that didn't already exist.
Well, it's a mostly solved game by some opinions. Well, maybe not the whole game, but certain substates are definitely solvable and solved. And yeah, there is a mountain of research. We've been playing this game literally for thousands of years, so there is some knowledge. So
you're not going to sit down and write something better than Stockfish. So it might be want to do it as an exercise, but I'd be more interested in doing it as an exercise in some different game that didn't already have that.
And what came after StarCraft, if anything?
I played a collectible card game called Sanctum. Online digital card game. It's like kind of like Magic the Gathering, except there's a board where there are armies who move around, tactics, battles, things like that. So 2 layers of play, the card game and then the card game which interacts with the board game. And for a while, I was the best player in the world at this, and that was very formative for me because it showed me that yes, although there are 7.5 billion people in the world, it is actually possible for little old me to actually be the best in the world at something. It's not that foreign. It's not that remote. I had to put a lot of work in. I thought about the game all the time. I played all the time. I did everything I could to be the best at the game, and it was possible. It's easier in a smaller niche. That game was not a very super popular game. Went out of business after not too long. Had only at max maybe a 5-figure player base, but I could be the best in the world at something, and that's something that informed my ambitions going forward. That maybe I can actually make something that has an impact in the world, or do something where I stand out in a big pool of people.
Amazing. Did you play any collectible card games in real life?
Yeah, I did and still do play Magic the Gathering. The boxes you see over my head are my Magic the Gathering collection, and I was playing just last night.
Some would say that's the original pay-to-win game. By some, I mean me, but let's not delve into that. And that was just a joke, to be clear. And
Understandable.
Even though I can see that I clearly hurt your feelings. So, any other CCG than Magic?
Really just those 2. I guess I played Hearthstone for a few years back when it first came out. Enjoyed that a lot for the time that I did.
Around this time, because you seem to be telling the games in chronological order. That was near the start of your working career. Is that correct?
My working career started in 2008. I think Hearthstone came out. I want to guess 2014. Sanctum, yeah. Sanctum came out in 1998. So I was still in middle school. I was 13 years, because I was 12 years old when Sanctum came out, and I played that through college, so till about 21.
Well, this is my failed attempt to steer the conversation towards did games affect your professional career, and what did you do, and if you want to talk about that at all.
Sure. Having played games so much and spending time making games and being very detached from any practical sense of how the world worked, I went through and came out of college thinking, I can't imagine actually spending 40 hours a week or more doing anything else other than making games. I couldn't visualize how that would be something that would be satisfying, or how I would not go insane doing something else. So I finished my studies in college with a focus on game development, and then tried to get a job after college. And this was very unfortunately early 2008, which, as we know, is a great year for the global economy. And I applied to uh, every single video game developer in the United States. I had a spreadsheet. Every single game developer I could find with any information online had a big spreadsheet. I applied to all of them, 400 of them. I got 3 interviews and 0 offers.
It'd be tough.
It'd be tough. And after that, I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. But a friend of mine, who was my classmate in college, had started working at this company and said, "Hey, we're looking for programmers. Would you be interested?" It was making educational software. And like, you know what? I got to do something. Clearly, there's no one left in the video game industry to talk to. Let's give it a try. And I really liked it. I had a great time there. I didn't see that coming. And it was, to me, the lesson I took away from that is that our society is usually structured such that you grow up, you go to school, and you're in this bubble, this educational bubble. And then very quickly, you're out in the real world, you're doing jobs, and so much what you're doing in school is informed by only what you learn in that bubble. You don't get to experience and interact with the professional working world that much, the world of people making stuff and doing at least nominally useful things. And I lacked so much perspective because of that, for being in that bubble. And that I did not realize that actually just doing a job where I felt valued and felt like I was doing something useful and feeling respect at the workplace because of that would be really satisfying. I didn't know that was possible. I didn't have a picture of that in my mind. And then I went out there, had my first job, and really felt that. And I didn't see it coming. And, fast forward 17 years, I felt that satisfaction a lot in the various times of my careers, and also had times where I was extremely miserable and left where I was working. But that was what takes us from me making games up to age 21 to me age 37 diving back into it.
That's yeah, it's interesting, and one thought that was forming in my head, that I have a feeling that in another life you would have been an excellent teacher, and I see that you have a knack for helping other people learn. Would you say that's correct?
I don't know. I can't. It's not an outcome I can measure, so I'm not going to hazard too much of a guess. I'll say that I do think I have more of an interest in learning how to communicate effectively than the average person who makes a career of programming. I think it's just something that I tend to care more about than the mean person who is a professional programmer. But I would not particularly try to rate my ability as an educator because I don't have any data on it.
Well, that's
I appreciate your kind words on the subject. I will take them under advisement.
a very very modest answer. Also, I feel called out, but anyway, it's yeah. Developers don't tend to be good communicators for one reason or other. But even on the SSCIT Discord, I noticed that you are eager to jump in and help people with programming or other problems, and you're just seem to happy to help and happy to advance people in their programming knowledge.
It's kind to say that. I want to see people making StarCraft bots. They're cool to watch. I love having them. And insofar as any technical difficulties are stopping people from making them, I'm very happy to spend a little time helping people get over those humps. When I first got started, or at least when I got started working on purplewave, I had some technical issues getting started, some things I couldn't figure out, and I jumped onto it was the IRC chat at the time, and a couple folks, Adakite, TSCBoo, Imp42, they helped me with some issues I had and got me over the hump. And I honestly, without their help, I might have just said, you know what, I've put a few hours into this. Issues are still happening. I don't know what's going on. Let me just go work on something else. And I might not be here today talking about StarCraft bots, and I would not have met you and all this if it wasn't for their help just getting me over the hump. So on Discord, I'm happy to pay that forward and help out people who are, trying to make a cool project like a StarCraft bot.
Actually, that's something I wanted to say as well, that perhaps the most positive thing is, or one of the most positive things from working in this area is getting to know a lot of cool people and meeting some of them. And yeah, you're exactly right. We wouldn't be talking otherwise. So yeah, that's a happy, not coincidence, but happy life path, I guess. And so when did you start working on purplewave, and did you have any AI experience or the like before? You said that you had trouble starting out.
Yeah, I started working on purplewave January of 2017. I've been following SSCIT and the scene for a few months prior to that, and I was really eager to get started. And January 2017 was the first time I really had time to dedicate to it. I had prior game AI programming experience. Another one of my hobbies in high school was competing at Robot Battle, which is one of the several tank programming games out there where you program the AI for a tank and you fight against other tanks, shoot the other tanks, try to win. And like Sanctum, that was something that for a while I was the best in the world at, and gave me confidence to work on other things. And then after that, I had some other small game AI programming projects. The Bandits bot I made for Warcraft 3 had custom AI, so you could play against the AI. I previously to that, I had done some very basic AI scripting in Warcraft 2 and StarCraft. And then for hackathons and some of my other jobs, the challenges were game AI programming challenges. Here's Connect 4, make a Connect 4 AI, and 48 hours try to beat everybody else. So I'd done a few things like that, and I took a game AI programming course in college. So I had some. I came into it and I felt more confident about the AI part of it than I did about the just getting StarCraft AI and the API up and running. That was actually where all the problems lied. The getting the tech stack working versus the actually making the bot do things I want. Which of course, 6 years later does plenty of things I don't want it to do. But for me, the big hurdle to getting started was just making the program run and connect to StarCraft and then run on SSCIT and do anything whatsoever. Versus once I had that up and running, I was just super eager to put in the hours and make it do more and more stuff because it was super rewarding watching that incremental change happen on screen. It was just the initial hump of getting the tech stack working that was holding me up.
I feel like you are talking about raising children a little bit. Yes.
I've often used the analogy of calling my StarCraft bot my child and watching it grow up and being very proud of it. And I can say, having had a child now, yeah, that was pretty accurate.
Well, if a witch comes and demands your firstborn, then you have a loophole here. And can we talk about cherry pie, actually?
Sure, absolutely.
So, how did you convince your employer, which was, well, then called Facebook, now Meta, to do that, or was it just a fortunate coincidence that you could participate in that?
So they had already been working on Cherry Pie and ultimately using StarCraft as a platform or problem domain for machine learning research well before I joined. Their first published paper on that was the release of Torchcraft, the API for connecting to StarCraft via a client-server model. And I think they published that like December 2016, January 2017-ish. And then they started work on the Cherry Pie competitive bot sometime that spring or summer. They entered it into the AIID tournament in 2017, and I think they've been working on it for really just like 2 or 3 months prior to that, really not that long at all. And then I joined in early November of that year, and my first contributions to that came out in the SSCIT entry, the winning SSCI entry from that December.
It's already quite a good look. And But Cherry Pie is not actively worked upon. I think that's not a secret. That project is shelved, and not Facebook/Meta is not developing it anymore.
Yes, that's accurate.
Do you think, first of all, how many resources were allocated to this? Like how many developers, testers, etc., worked on it? If you can reveal that.
I'm generally not going to reveal any things like that, but I could. If you look at like the people who publicly are credited as working on it, from the papers and blog posts, it is like about 12 different people worked on at some point. I think like a max of 10 people at any one specific point in time.
So it's quite a non-trivial amount of effort, and it wasn't just a hobby project of some developers. And I feel it could have been much more, but I guess we'll never know.
I mean, ultimately, there's going to be research goals, and there's going to be a decision to make a certain amount of investment in the project. And you can always make more, you can always make less, but that was what the organization opted to do. And there's also the fact that Facebook AI Research is a bottom-up organization largely. For a big bunch of projects, there's top-down considerations, but it's also a question of who wanted to work on it, who wanted to work on StarCraft as a problem domain. So between those two constraints, that was the team that formed, and that was the project that was undertaken.
And speaking of AI in general, where is the border between AI and just a lot of statements? How would you define AI in a general sense?
I don't really care what's defined. It's been an ongoing question for decades, and to me, the labeling question isn't important. I don't really care whether something is called AI or is not called AI. It's if it feels like AI, it's AI. That's as far as I'd go with it. If I really had to sit down and make a proper definition for it, if it's making decisions that feel halfway intelligent, it's AI. That's all.
My dog isn't. Anyway, let's talk about a little bit, if you're up to it, recent waves in AI and recent developments in AI and the splashes made in popular culture, specifically ChatGPT. Or I would be surprised if you are not familiar with it. Have you tried it? Have you looked at it?
I'm a paid subscriber. Yeah, I use ChatGPT a lot. As soon as I got in, I started trying it out as a programming assistant, and not in the sense of writing code, but asking it questions about how do I use this library I'm not familiar with using. So at the time, I was working on the prototype for Go Forth. And I was using 3.js. It's a very lightweight 3D engine in JavaScript, and I was looking for examples of how to do things. And as it turns out, ChatGPT has read the 3JS documentation and code for various projects and blog posts and all that, and it can answer questions about 3JS very intelligently. If I want to ask, like, what's a reasonable approach to try to do A, but also accomplish B and C, that's a hard thing to look up. You can look up, any specific narrow questions of how do I do A, how do I do B, how do I do C, and you might find the documentation, you might find in Stack Overflow. But if you want to tie these considerations together without fully understanding all of them up front, ChatGPT is actually very good at helping answer questions like that. So I tried it out, and I immediately found it invaluable. It got to the point that when ChatGPT was down, I felt like I didn't want to work on the project for a while. I felt like I wanted to get up from my desk and take a break because it was just so much higher friction trying to get things done without it. So I still use it as a everyday tool for programming, but also other things. I was doing my taxes the other day. Unfortunately, in the United States, you have to manually do your taxes, even though the IRS knows exactly how many dollars you should owe, but just doesn't want to tell you. And I had a question.
You have to guess, and if you guess wrong, you go to jail. It's fair.
Exactly. And there's something I wanted to know, so I tried searching for it. I do the obvious thing and go to Google and type in phrases which I think will lead to the question. And I click through a few pages, and by the time I've spent 60 seconds on this, I think you just ask ChatGPT. Of course, ChatGPT can hallucinate things. It can give you wrong information, but it can give you if it gives you something that you can verify, that's at least a good starting point to work with. So I asked the question, got a great explicit answer, confirmed it externally, which was easier to verify than was to find the answer in the first place. got my answer, and moved on.
Did you rely on ChatGPT so much that you couldn't actually progress without it, or it was just so useful that you didn't want to?
It was so useful that I felt a loss of motivation when it was gone. It felt like I was feeling additional friction to do anything when I didn't have it available to answer my questions.
There is a popular view on the internet nowadays that, oh no, ChatGPT will automate a lot of jobs and they will took our jobs. They took our jobs further. I completely disagree with that. But what's your take on that?
Historically, anything that's made programmers more effective at programming, I'll just use programming as the first case example. Anything that's made programmers more effective at programming has led to more programming. Once upon a time, you had to like punch cards to make a program work. You have big stack cards, you better not drop it, right? It was harder to write software. It meant that the cost of doing anything in programming meant that a lot of things that you could be done with software, you didn't want to because it was more work and more expensive. So every time the tooling gets better to do programming, more programming happens, more problems get solved with programming. We know today that there's not enough programmers in the world to meet the needs of humans on Earth, right? That's why programmers get paid too much. And it's why there's lots of bad software out there. There's lots of stuff that still gets done with pen and paper or with Excel, where if programming was cheap and accessible, it would be done with programming. And the rise of ChatGPT, and in the future we expect the tools will be better, drives down the cost of making software, but the need for software is still not saturated. So I don't expect programmers are going to go away or lose their jobs anytime soon. ChatGPT cannot tell you what software you should write. It doesn't answer questions of what software can you write that people will want. It doesn't solve all of those little things that a human in the loop helps solve.
Basically,
so for my own profession, I'm not worried about it. Go ahead.
Somehow I'm not either. And basically, it can solve a lot of programming, but it cannot really solve software development as of yet.
Right.
And
now, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Other fields, it's less clear. A problem that we suffer from with the rapid growth of technology in our current lifespans is that economic situations don't move as fast as technology. People train for careers, they invest years of their lives into a certain line of work, a certain line of education that leads to a certain profession, and the timeline of payoff for those professions is sometimes slower than the pace of technology, which changes them, which obviates them, or which renders them less valuable because there's some kind of technological alternative. And that is not something we figured out. People have been losing jobs throughout the course of my lifetime because of technological changes. You think of anyone whose job was, dealing with things that were in pen and paper. Data entry is something that happens a lot less than it used to because we have a lot less data on paper. And societally, we don't handle that well. People get really hurt by that. People lose their jobs, people lose their professions, people have to, move away from their families to find new work. It has a lot of impacts. And the improvement in AI technology is going to be one more of those. I don't know exactly what effects it will have, but that will be one of them. It will disrupt people's livelihoods. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean that the progress of technology is not in aggregate a good thing, but people will be individually really hurt by this. We have to acknowledge that.
That's an excellent answer, and I feel that one category of jobs that we will lose is, let's call it content farming. Is just churning out low quality articles, videos, etc. And I'm not sure that wasn't automated to a large degree even before ChatGPT. If you ever had to look up anything in a video game, then you must have encountered 2 pages of useless information and repeating the question, and then the number that you are looking for. Yeah, ChatGPT is probably excellent at that, but I somehow don't feel bad for people not getting paid for that sort of thing. That's not to say I don't sympathize with like people losing their jobs over this, but we are not far along in this that we can evaluate the true impact. And also, it is a productivity multiplier, and we've seen that when farmers switched from horse-drawn plows from tractors, farmers didn't really go out of a job, or they just transformed how they work and they just multiplied their output. Now, take this with a lot of caveats, but I think this is pretty much what will happen. However, the other big AI improvement, which is AI generated pictures and even videos, and it can do some amazing things. That I'm a little bit more worried about. What's your thoughts on Stable Diffusion, was the DALL-E and the like?
There's at least two columns of ethical issues that get brought up in the context of AI content generation. One is the impact on people's professions that we just discussed, the livelihood impact, and then there's the what are the ethics of digesting content to train a model to produce more content. I think the same ideas apply on the livelihood side. That on the one side, people will get hurt by this, but on the other hand, reducing the costs of doing something in a profession where the need for it is not fully saturated may actually just mean that more of that activity happens and counterbalances the effect of more automation. I expect if you're an up and coming artist and you're a commercially minded artist, you have a mind towards developing your skills and your career towards the needs of the marketplace, you will learn to incorporate these tools in your art. You will be a better artist for it. You'll be able to express yourself better with these tools once you've really fully integrated them into your skill set than would be possible otherwise. You know, the camera had a big impact on art for hundreds of years between the Renaissance and the 19th century. Artists strove largely for realism, try to get ever more realistic, even if superhuman, super realistic portrayals of your local nobility who are your patrons, getting your current monarch depicted with more detail and perspective than the monarch who preceded them. But then the photograph came out, and suddenly you didn't need a painter to construct a detailed image of reality. Even if you want to add an artistic bent to it, you can still do that with photography to a degree. And as a result, we saw the development of more abstract styles of art. We had Impressionism. We had if you picture Picasso, to me, something like Picasso is part of the reaction to photography existing. And I see the impact of AI generated content in the same way, that it will change what we value in art, and that the tools will be integrated, just like artists integrate photography as a component of how they do art. You'll see these tools become part of the tool set. So I expect the economic impact will not be especially high, but that's just a prediction. I don't have high confidence in that prediction. On the other hand, you have the question of what are the ethics of training models using people's artwork to the point that they can reproduce styles that have been developed by individual people. And that's sticky. That's a tricky one. On the one hand, humans train their eyes by looking at art. You go into a museum and you see someone's art, and then you go home and you make something and it's inspired by what you saw before. And we accept that as humans, partly because there's no other alternative. Like there's no concept of an artist who doesn't go around looking at pre-existing art that they have blinders on and don't use anything developed by anyone else. But also that because there's a personal cost entailed in making any piece of art, that a human still had to put their time into it. It didn't just pop out of a GPU in a couple of seconds. And even then, we still have concerns about biting someone's work or ripping off someone's work. And we still haven't figured that out on the human side of what it means to be adequately inspired by someone versus stealing someone's work. It's true in music too. You look at court cases of sampled music or music that borrows components from other music, and there's still no consistency in the court rulings on how much of someone's musical idea could you borrow before it becomes copyright infringement. So we still haven't figured that out on the human side. And when you subtract the blood, sweat, and tears element of the GPU can pop this out in a few seconds, it becomes more complicated. And then there's the copyright issue of, do we care about the letter of the law with respect to models being trained on images? Is training a model on an image a form of copyright infringement. Open questions. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the answer to those. But we have more problems than we had before. We have more lack of consensus than we had before around these issues. I don't have answers. I'll say that if you accept the restriction that models cannot train on things they can look at, I believe that is handicapping technology and our ability to do things with technology. I think if that's the hill that someone wants to put themselves on, I think it's the wrong hill. I don't think answering that answers all the ethical questions. I think there's still a lot of open room for discussion, like ideas of fighting and ripping off. But to me, I do strongly believe that the law should allow models to train on existing content that's available to human eyes.
What do you think of the... I don't know if you have heard that there is an open letter that came out from some industry leaders that said that, hey, please, AI researchers, stop the pace of technology until we... do you think that's gonna do anything, and do you think it's the right move to make?
So I'll unpack that as two separate questions. One is, do we think that there are...
Very loaded question, I know.
No, it's fine. It's something I absolutely spend time thinking about, and I'm happy to answer. It's very topical. On the one hand, you got the question of, does existential AI risk exist? And then the other question is, if so, what do we do about it? Is it possible? I believe it's possible. I believe once you have software and hardware that can do things that humans can't, and they already do, but as the horizon expands and becomes a superset of human capabilities, you do have to worry: can software and hardware that is smarter than us replace us in some fashion? There are lots of hypotheses about how that could happen. There's there's gradual takeover hypotheses. There's instant. This one AI has spread itself to a bunch of different nodes and now starts placing orders to synthesize biological materials at wet labs that don't realize that they're being asked to synthesize things that are hazardous, and then suddenly we all drop dead. So there's a whole spectrum of concepts around that. The answer is I don't know. I do believe that there is a greater than 0% possibility that that threat exists. I do think long term we do have to consider the implications of having software that is more competent than us. Humans have been replaced before. We used to have Neanderthals, now we don't.
I believe that's already happened to a degree with so-called smart devices. When it is not smarter than us, but we overly rely on a piece of software and or hardware we deem smart. And you get, I know that's a populist example, but self-driving cars crashing into walls, it's not a good example for various reasons, but still, or your home security systems just being able, just not working as intended, or being able to hacked by relatively easy means. I think AI developments are comparable here. It's something that I feel people will rely on beyond its capabilities, and that's gonna cause problems. Would you say that's accurate, or?
I'm pondering the point you're making.
I see the gears turning. Yes.
Well, we're very dependent on electricity. I'm not sure. I am not prepared. Like an animal that was raised in the zoo and then you attempt to release it to the wild. I am not prepared to live in a world with electricity. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to handle food in a way that I won't die of food poisoning if I don't have refrigeration. I might have some ideas, but someone who actually lived in that world is going to know way more than I can. Humans manage to get by without electricity, but they do things that I don't. They do things about food preparation and handling and all that I don't. Their digestive systems were probably also trained from a young age to eat food that was of a less sanitary nature than what we get to experience today. But I also don't regret having electricity. So I'm I'm relatively happy to be dependent on electricity. That dependence involves a trade-off, and I think I'm getting the better end of it by far. And for additional developments in technology, I don't particularly expect to adopt things that are bad for me. Yes, I probably eat too many calories. My blood sugar is a little too high. My cholesterol is a little too high. But I've got it under control. I'm addicted to electricity and to computing and to this lifestyle, but I've also got it under control. And something like ChatGPT, where I feel its absence immediately as soon as I want to do something with it and don't have access to it, it's not great, but I have it under control. And I continue to have that perspective towards any new technology that's going to come out.
There is a reason our cameras are cut off at about this height, I think. I suppose it's the same for both of us. And yeah, lockdowns didn't help in that regard. But to be back to the topic at hand, I simply have no disagreements with that, and I think yeah, trade-off is a good good word to summarize it. We always get more dependent on technology, but then again, it's very rare that these things fail us, and redundancy and fallbacks are a thing and can be built into any piece of software. Whether or not we will actually do it, I don't know. Probably there will be hilarious consequences. I don't think AI is at a level where it can replace human incompetency.
I'm going to loop back to your previous question about the letter about pausing AI development. Finish my very long-winded thought on the subject. I don't think the approach can work. I don't think you can ask that for that pause to happen. One, people aren't going to agree to it, and two, if people do agree to it, the only people who are not pausing development are going to be bad actors. So, although I think it's a good approach for driving awareness of causing people to take the idea seriously, I don't think you can steer something that is as decentralized as AI development in that fashion. I don't think you can legislate it. I don't think you can pause individual actors. I fully expect that the course of events will be similar to what we had with nuclear weapons, where this new technology came out, humanity was offered multiple chances to destroy itself with it, and we came very close on a couple of occasions. The odds were in our favor. It worked out. We still have not destroyed ourselves with nuclear warfare. I like our odds. I would bet against rapid AI destruction of humanity. I would bet that the problems that we have are gradual enough that we deal with them in a way that humanity goes on and persists in a world with a few glassed over islands of the world and some scarring and some problems and a lot of pain. But I would bet that we get through it. And I don't think that any top-down approach to try to fix the risk or prevent the risk is liable to work, which is to say, it's a gamble. The progress that we will make is a gamble. I'll bet on a good outcome, but I don't think there's any way to guarantee it.
And yeah, it's we have to realize that this is very much a first world problem and likely will stay that way, because even nowadays, I think like 1/3 of the world doesn't even have electricity. I don't think they are concerned about ChatGPT at this
point. I think that's one of the reasons why it's hard to drive any action on that front, is that to solve a problem that requires society scaled solutions, society scoped solutions, society's got to care. And as you say, most people have much bigger problems and much more immediate problems that collectively as a species we've done a bad job of solving.
Well, with that happy thought, I'm kind of out of topics to discuss. Is there anything else you want to add, or you feel we skipped over, anything like that? And also, people in the chat, feel free to ask any questions.
I wonder if you want to take the time to discuss some of your own game development projects, or you'd prefer to do that another time under a different forum?
I would be open to this, not right now because I quite simply haven't been prepared to that. But yeah, the time is coming, and I have some draft articles explaining that. I have a lot of going on in my personal life, and I just put that aside. This podcast is a return to quote unquote normal for me, where I can actually work on my projects. Thankfully, nothing negative has happened. It's just I've been busy with life. So, but thanks for asking. But sort of an elephant in the room is Schnell development, and I guess a lot of people are curious about that. The current state is I'm maintaining it. I will, if need be, I will pay a little bit more to keep it up. I don't know how long. Uh, I don't have a good answer for that. It's in its current state. It's. I'm very happy that we have close to 10,000 users. Now I can. Have no qualms about revealing the numbers, and currently 612,000 recorded games means that that's just the number of games and replays available on Snail, which I consider an achievement. I'm proud of that. But commercially, it's not really a success, which I'm completely fine with. I accepted that, and honestly don't care at this point. But yeah, keeping it up costs money, and that's the main concern. And we will see. Uh, Although I do plan in open sourcing it sometimes in the future, I just didn't have the mental energy.
I encourage you to talk about the costs, publicize them, show the numbers of what does it cost to host this, and then line it up with what you're making on Patreon. And that I think that's a great way to encourage people to sign on and subscribe. I think a mistake a lot of these projects do this is that they cost money and the creators ask for Patreon subscribers, but no one knows are they doing okay? Do they have enough? Like, do they need my help? And I think being transparent about that can help a lot. Like, what are the monthly costs? How are you doing in terms of covering them? What does it mean for the runway that Chanel has, etc. So I would encourage you to take that transparent approach to help ensure that the costs are met.
I'm a little bit averse to that, but it's not a secret how a server like that costs. What I will probably do is have at least a frequent status update, even if even if that update just consists of hey, everything is just the same. And yeah, we will see. But mostly I've been occupied with a different game development project, and Schneider is in maintenance mode. I haven't decided what to do with it, and to be honest, the current state of StarCraft is not very encouraging with all the limbo that Blizzard is in. I do hope that one day we will have some official support, and we can do all that we do on remastered. But that's a rabbit hole that we went into a few times. So
I think the amateur scene and I think the professional scene in StarCraft 1 is still very strong compared to what it is historically. If you look at like the number of people who are watching StarCraft and on streams in Korea, it's as strong as it's ever been. Really, you get 6-figure streams in on Afrika. It's still in a healthy state, and the fact that 600,000 games have been played on Schnell is a testament to that. People still love this game and play this game. And I think what Schnell has
definitely.
done is big achievement. That 600,000 games, that represents a lot of human hours of time of fun being had because of Schnell. That's amazing.
That's a comforting thought, and you're right. And I'm happy that I was able to facilitate that. Although the it's not only my achievement, since I didn't write the bots. So thanks again for everyone who did. So yeah, I think we can I think we can wrap it up here, because apparently I'm losing my ability to speak. Thanks everyone who tuned in. I will put this up on YouTube soon, and for now, I think I will just raid someone I know on Twitch. And
Thanks for having me back, Shango. It's been a long time, and I'm glad to be back. And
oh
thanks
yes,
everyone
and
for watching.
I really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, maybe we can do this, or maybe we can have a podcast with multiple people involving you. I would. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching, and bye for now. Well, in 10 seconds when the raid will commence, but mm,
All right, man. Good chatting with you. Good catch up with you. I thought that went well.